Okay. Some of these individuals who have learning disabilities have become the class clown. The kid that acts out, providing entertainment for everybody else, and that deflects attention away from what they fear will be exposed, and that's their inabilities. So again, intellectually, they know that they have an inability, or at least they believe it's an inability to perform certain tasks. Some of these students are identified as having an LD early in their educational careers, and again, that answers your question. Sometimes, very often, it will be later in life, and most of the people that I've seen, it's been in high school, and sometimes their freshman year of college. 70 to 80% of individuals with learning disabilities are identified and diagnosed with a reading disorder. And within that group, there are several subcategories, and it becomes more complex when we start looking at this, and this requires much more time to explain, but I think it's sufficient to say that 70 to 80% of them have reading disorders, and that impacts their entire lives. Some parents are very supportive of their kids' challenges, and some parents don't understand how to help and how to intervene, and that's an enormous issue we have culturally in our society. We need to provide parents with much more help in this. Dr. Martha Dinkla is an MD, and she's the director of the Developmental Cognitive Neurology Department at the Kennedy Krieger Institute, and she's a professor of neurology. She's widely published on the biological bases for learning disabilities and attention deficit disorder in children of normal and above normal intelligence. So she's someone I look to very often for information, and she posited the theory that some learning disabilities should be reconsidered as a disability in production rather than in learning. Because very often in these profiles we find that it's a processing speed that's holding them back, and really does present them with the inability to get a task done on time, to finish the test on time, to be able to process their thoughts in the right amount of time in order to get the grade that they need. They are often left behind, and not because they can't learn, but because they can't produce the correct answers or demonstrate their understanding fast enough. Being left behind repeatedly creates an open invitation for getting into trouble, for academic failure, and for depression. So now I want to move on to the workplace. The workplace of an individual with mild intellectual disability, so we're back to that original population we talked about, is trained and educated to the fullest extent of his capabilities. He can be successful at maintaining employment. And today we have lots of companies that are very active in this process, and they're bringing these students and young adults in, they're training them, and they're very good to them. On the other hand, some individuals with learning disabilities require guidance as well. They may not need a caseworker, but they need guidance in choosing a career or training in order to avoid skills and tasks that they have real difficulty with. And very often what they'll do is choose a career that's going to expose some of these difficulties for them. They may choose to be teachers, where they're going to be expected to write reports all of the time, write letters to parents, run training sessions. And while the quality of thought is there, it's the ability sometimes to be able to write this out, to organize a presentation. There's a lot involved in this, and they need guidance. Let me see here. There's a distinct need for appropriate counseling and advising for this population. So if anyone's thinking of that, there's an enormous need here. Let's move on to the justice system. Do you have any questions or comments? Okay, so the justice system would require hours to talk about this, okay? But generally speaking, individuals in detention centers are more likely to have experienced difficulty in school as a result of a mild intellectual disability or a learning disability. So we're looking at both groups now. The individual with an intellectual disability often falls prey to a group, again, who takes advantage of the opportunity to exploit others, leading to arrest and incarceration. Individuals with intellectual disabilities also find themselves in trouble within the facility because they appear to be non-compliant when in fact they probably are not understanding your directions, or they may spontaneously shout something out, respond to you in anger, and they might strike out physically, exacerbating an already difficult situation. Some of our U.S. prisons are developing programs devoted to educating and guiding these individuals, many of whom are mildly intellectually impaired. They receive good attention and skills in their education, and they're also monitored for their moods and for the behavior. Do you have something to add to that? I know you've had experience with this. Yeah.
I think that one of the challenges, especially in dealing with the juvenile justice population, is that it depends on the jurisdiction, but some jurisdictions prosecute teens who are already in residential programs that are addressing these issues, and the kids get out of control there and strike somebody, or even when escorted to timeout rooms, they strike somebody and they are charged with assault and battery. So then their behavior is criminalized, and it's a lot harder to deal with. So because on top of having the stigma of the learning disability or the intellectual disability or both, they have to deal with the criminal or the delinquent label that is attached to them. So that is very frustrating, especially for those of us in the mental health system working with the courts, because there's a lot of times there's nothing we can do to stop the labeling of these individuals as delinquent when they are in a setting that is supposed to be helping them.
That's right.
So that is more of a policy and advocacy role for people in the mental health system.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and a deeper understanding of how this is all diagnosed. You know, how do we get to that point? Individuals with learning disabilities may have dropped out of school as a result of academic failure, repeated a grade or two. This is all going to be noted in histories that you take of individuals, or just not being participants in the culture of school for whatever reason, and maybe it's because they're hiding. Eventually leading to behaviors that are sometimes perceived as antisocial. And that doesn't mean that that's not the case, but sometimes it often just looks like it is. In 1999, Zabel and Nigro conducted a study with 266 youths in detention, and I haven't found a better study than this that's more recent, actually. They're ranging in age from 12 to 18. They were categorized into two groups, special education and non-special education. They found that youth with LDs, learning disabilities, were at a higher risk for committing violent crimes than others, and that was 17 out of 30. That's big. Okay, that's significant. I'm hoping that some of this is changing with more vigilance to the system and our earlier observation of all of this. And according to Nancy Cowarden in her article, Disorganized Crime, Learning Disability in the Criminal Justice System, and this is an old one too, but this is a great article, and I'm hoping we've made some strides. The Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, impacts a variety of prison programs, including vocational training, hearings, and other aspects of daily prison life. Prisons have a legal obligation to provide these kinds of opportunities, especially for youth under the age of 22. And I'm still looking for articles. These are two very germane articles, I think, and while they are aging, we're looking for more people to do more research in this field. So in part 3 of the series, we're going to discuss how these populations respond to therapy. And in part 2, we'll be looking at attention deficit disorder and bipolar disorder. Thank you.